These days, you don't really smell as much cigarette smoke when you're out and about in Singapore. And in fact, I definitely see less cigarette butts. But sometimes I catch a whiff of a scent in the air. Maybe an apple scent, candy, or even some chocolate. I don't see cigarettes, but I do see a small puff of smoke emit from the person near me. Well, to the uninitiated, that is a vape, an e-cigarette. Now, these vaping devices are battery operated, and it works by heating a liquid substance which contains nicotine. But that nicotine can be masked in almost any flavor you want. So is it legal, you ask? No, it is not. In Singapore, the import and sale of e-cigarettes has always been banned, and in 2017 the law was extended to cover purchase, use and possession of such devices. 6 years on, the problem of vaping has not, vaporized. Quite the opposite, actually. From 2020 to 2022, the number of people caught vaping has more than tripled. If anything, it has entrenched itself, not just among the young who are attracted by the lower costs and different flavors, but also by older adults who are convinced that this is less harmful compared to cigarettes. Today we go behind the smoke and mirrors of vaping. Why is this current approach not working? What more can be done? Why does vaping continue to find new users? With me to break this down are Associate Professor Bipash Chakraborty from Duke NUS Medical School.
Hello everyone, nice to be here.
Sean Ang, a smoking cessation specialist.
Hey everyone, it's a pleasure to be here.
And Sarah, someone who currently vapes, and she's asked to stay anonymous.
Hi everybody, this is Sarah. Nice to be here too.
So thanks guys, let's kick off this discussion. Prof, I'm going to start with you. Help us understand the scope of the issue here. The figures show that there's a sharp rise in people vaping, especially the young. Why is this happening?
I think there are a number of issues here. First, of course, there is the myth that e-cigarettes are safe, while in reality, that's not. And in fact, e-cigarettes can pose a variety of health hazards. But other than that, there are quite a few practical issues. One is the fact that these are cheaper, these are relatively easy to buy online. And another kind of disturbing fact is that, vaping is perceived to be cool and trendy. And social media has a lot to do with that perception. And this leads to peer pressure, particularly among the youth. These are very important issues and challenging to address. And another thing is that it's less detectable compared to the typical tobacco smell. It comes with many different flavors, so that's perceived cool and it's also easy to hide. So all these things are adding to the issue and probably contributing to the rise.
Sean, can you give us a sense of what you're seeing? In the chat earlier, you mentioned that you're getting requests to speak to even primary school students about vaping. And these are kids as young as 10 years old.
Yeah, so I started my work actually working with adults in 2010 as a pharmacist. And later, I moved into the youth side of things. By youth, I mean 13 to 17 years old. And there was once my team had a request to conduct a program for kids as young as 10 years old. When we first started, it was primarily cigarette smoking. And as the years went by, we conducted this program for quite a few years. It became more apparent that vaping was becoming a thing. It came to the point that you just can't ignore it anymore. At the point when we started to notice this trend, like for me personally, I struggled to learn more about it, right? Because in pharmacy school, as healthcare professionals, when we learn about vaping, we learn about all the ill effects of it. But then you have people coming to you and saying, oh, no, this thing actually helps me to stop smoking. And my friends are all doing it right now. So it's more than just something that's an ill effect, right? It's becoming a trend already. And so I started to ask myself questions. Why is it becoming a thing among the youth? And that's where I started to delve a lot deeper into the world of vaping, trying super hard to learn where they get their supplies from. It used to be from very shady places, like railway tracks, a certain block of flats, as the kids would tell me. And now it's all over Telegram, right? It's just so easy to get at this point.
What did you discover in the sense that why was it so appealing to these young people?
I started with a lot of videos on YouTube where there was this kind of like a movement overseas that people started to say it was healthier. And after a while, it became quite a cool thing because people started doing tricks with all the smoke and, they had a ring of smoke and they blew something through it. It became a fun thing and kids tried to achieve these things. There are many reasons why people pick up smoking, and it's kind of like the same reasons why people get into vaping. But part of the reason it's for them, they find it's a challenge. And when I ask a lot of the kids, where do you get caught for smoking? Is it outside? I said, sure, no, not outside. And I was like, huh, not outside school, then where? And I'm like, in school? They're like, yeah, sure. Getting caught outside school is too mainstream. The challenge is to smoke or to vape within a restricted environment and not get caught. So for some of them, it became a challenge. And that's alongside all the other effects that nicotine gives you, right? The boost in energy, etc. So some of them will actually only vape or smoke before a PE session. On days that they have PE, then they will vape or smoke. If they have a NAPFA test, then they will vape or smoke. If not, they don't.
Wow. So they felt it was like a bit of a booster. In fact, not too long ago, we did a 2-part special for the show Talking Point, which was all about vaping. And we spoke to many young people who said that vapes don't burn tobacco. That's what they said. So, as you mentioned, it doesn't smell bad. They believe it doesn't produce as harmful elements like tar or carbon monoxide. So they believe it's a better alternative to cigarettes. So, Sarah, let me come to you. Do you believe that vaping is less harmful than cigarettes?
I didn't really read about the differences between vaping and cigarette smoking, but I think for me it's a more convenient way, I would say, right? Because I don't have to get to a smoking area to smoke cigarettes. I have to get to a smoking area to smoke cigarettes, but in terms of vaping, I don't have to.
So what made you switch from smoking to vaping?
Yeah, it's a more convenient way for me to smoke. Maybe in my room when I'm doing my own work and things like that, I can just vape.
Oh,
I don't have to
okay.
get out of my room and to find a place to smoke. So it's an easier alternative.
Okay, so it's really just because of the convenience.
Yeah, convenience. And after a while, I realized that I don't need to smoke cigarettes anymore.
Okay, what do you mean by you don't need to smoke cigarettes anymore? Were you doing both at the same time for a while?
Yeah, so for a start, I was vaping and then I was smoking cigarettes. Subsequently, I think after a few months, I realized I can just do away with cigarettes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you feel better? Does it give you the same kick?
Initially, no. I still feel like I get more kick from cigarette smoking. But subsequently, I guess my body got used to just I'm okay with just vaping without cigarettes.
Right. And do you feel like you're vaping more than you were smoking cigarettes? As in the volume, the quantity?
I didn't really measure that. But since it's more convenient, I would assume that, it's much easier for me to vape.
Because from my understanding, I think one of those pods, they say is about equivalent to 20 cigarettes. Would you agree that's kind of true? How many cigarettes did you used to smoke?
So a day I can smoke maybe 8 to 10.
Okay.
Right?
And now with the vape, how fast do you go through one pod?
So a pod maybe can last me about 3 to 4 days.
Okay.
So it's a bit more cost efficient.
Yeah, maybe share with us also, in terms of the cost, what's the price compared to a packet of cigarettes?
So a packet of cigarettes easily costs you about $12, depending on the brand, of course. A device these days can cost you about a lot of money. So this same device, you can just get one device and then you just get the pods for refills. So one pod, usually a box of pods comes in 3. So it's about 30 over depending.
Oh, so for 3 pods, you're saying it costs about $30?
30 plus, yeah.
Okay, so it is cheaper than buying traditional cigarettes.
Cheaper, yeah.
So, Prof, when you hear of people like Sarah, she's saying that she switched because it's really just more convenient. And, as you mentioned, you can do it in so many places. It doesn't smell so bad. So is it really about this convenience? Has that what's made it so accessible and more young people are jumping on because I guess it's just so easy to get?
Yeah, I think so. It has a lot to do with the recent rise. It's so easy and cheaper. But the point is it's still unsafe.
So, yes, one argument is that people believe that it is actually safer or less harmful than traditional cigarettes. Is that truth or is that myth?
Okay, so long story short, we are not sure yet. Smoking versus vaping may have some differences in exactly what diseases it can cause, but definitely we know that both are bad for health. To what extent, things are not very definitive. The results, the findings are not very definitive yet. More long-term research is needed to know exactly the risk profiles. We have to wait long-term to know exactly, what's going on.
Sean, what's your take on this?
I think there are a few things about this, right? Firstly, by no means is vaping healthy. I mean, almost everyone I know understands that. Even the kids know it's not healthy. And then we delve into the comparison. So a lot of the harm from cigarette smoking comes from the combustion of the tobacco leaves or the burning of the tobacco leaves, right? That's when the thousands of dangerous chemicals are actually produced and where higher risk for lung cancers come from, the tar, etc. So without combustion, then you have less of the dangerous chemicals. But there's still, of course, nicotine, right, which causes addiction and all the cardiovascular problems that come with it. Well, some of the kids try to convince me that they use products without nicotine, it's just a vapor. True or not, I don't know, but I doubt so. And then in vaping, you have different types, right? You have the e-cigarettes, 4 different generations of e-cigarettes. And you have the different types, which are the heated tobacco products. So they've kind of discovered that you can heat tobacco to a certain temperature and it releases nicotine. So it still gives you the kick. It helps with the addictive effects, but no combustion. It's important to remember that there are chemicals involved, it's not completely safe. In fact, as I understand it, there are still a lot of chemicals that the scientists don't even know what's in there. So it's just a lot about the marketing. They feel that it's healthier. In some ways it is, but the effects of nicotine can still have an effect on the heart, on the brain. And how much nicotine really is in each pod? Like big question.
Right.
People believe what's marketed to them, but what else are the other chemicals? Another big question.
Yeah, and then the problem comes when people become dual user. Thankfully for Sarah, we just heard that she gradually switched to only one of the modes of taking nicotine. But there are some studies where people keep taking both. They were doing both smoking cigarettes and vaping, so that multiplies the problem.
Right. And in some cases, some of them believe that vaping is a good tool to help transition towards a non-smoking life.
Right.
Yeah. Is that something you would hope to do, Sarah? Are you hoping that at some point to quit smoking?
Yeah.
Do you think vaping has helped you in that respect?
Yeah, because I don't feel the need to really go and buy a cigarette and smoke cigarettes anymore.
But do you believe that vaping is just as harmful?
I do believe there are some form of harmful effects or side effects of vaping.
Okay.
But I do have friends telling me that when they used to smoke cigarettes, they cough a lot at night. But after switching to vape, they stop coughing at night so frequently.
But in terms of, for yourself, how does it feel? Do you feel smoking cigarettes, vaping, is it the same for you?
It's different now. I feel like I smell better now.
yeah, I guess you wouldn't smell like cigarette smoke for
Sometimes
one.
I smell like strawberry, sometimes I smell like apple. So, yeah. But in terms of health-wise, I don't see any drastic change from the switch.
So, is it your plan to eventually stop smoking and stop vaping? Is that something you would hope to do?
Yeah, of course. I would just hope to stop smoking entirely.
So when it comes to vaping, do you also feel the urge as much as when you were smoking traditional cigarettes?
Not really, because I can go for hours without vaping as well. Sometimes when the battery runs out, I don't have a portable charger with me. I can't vape also. So...
Okay, that's actually one way to stop smoking. Just don't charge your device and then you have no choice.
Because the device has to be charged before you can use it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What would you say to Sarah? She's hoping to stop smoking altogether eventually, and she feels that vaping is one step in that direction. What would you say to her about that?
I would say to her that there are risks involved. There are a lot of things that we don't know about vaping, but I also know that it has helped some people in a certain way. So to carry on, she has to understand that there are risks that she will have to take and there are consequences that she will have to bear. So it's a big risk. Just because it's helping some people doesn't mean it's going to help in everyone. So she has to make a judgment from there, what's best for her.
In Sarah's case, she's saying it's helping her transition to a non-smoking lifestyle. Is that something, Prof, that you think would be useful for people who are wanting to stop smoking altogether eventually? Can they take this as a step down?
Yes, I think so. There is literature suggesting that as a method of transition for smoking cessation ultimately. This has been recommended at places, but there has been these potential challenges that some people remain addicted to both, become dual user. As long as that doesn't happen, this is a reasonable thing to try out. But always have to be very careful about that danger that if you use it long term, not as a transition, then there will be probably almost equal harm to your health. That's something to keep in mind.
So, would you ever recommend a smoker who wants to stop smoking traditional cigarettes and they say, can I take up vaping as a way to transition to stopping smoking? Does that make sense?
I've seen quite a few cases where my patients have come to me and they've tried it. Some of it works. As a healthcare professional, it's really difficult for me to recommend something like that because the way that we work is evidence-based protocol, evidence-based measures. In my training as a pharmacist, for example, you look at medicines like paracetamol, something used for fever and for pain. Right? The reason why we can recommend something like that is because there's extensive research on it, and you know that when a person takes paracetamol with a certain amount, a certain dose, a certain regimen, and if you take it that way, a very, very high percentage of people will experience a certain therapeutic effect, which means that if it works for person A, you can replicate this in person B, person C, person D, and there's a high chance of success. But you can only do that if you know exactly what ingredient is giving you that effect, you know exactly what kind of regimen you use with those chemicals, and what protocol is effective for a certain target population. Do we have that with vapes right now? I don't even know what's in each pot. I don't even know whether it's correct. What's on the box. So until that happens, you're not going to get this into the guidelines. I don't think that healthcare professionals can actually recommend it as a medical aid.
Hi, I'm Adrian Tan.
And I'm Crispina Robert.
We are the host of a new podcast called Work It.
We're here to get into the essential things that no one tells you about working in company culture, from office politics to dealing with burnout.
If you've ever wanted to eavesdrop on an interesting conversation by the water cooler,
this podcast is for you.
Look out for our episodes wherever you get your podcast.
When you think about it, our war on smoking is pretty harsh. Our laws here, we make people like Sarah go stand in a yellow box in some far corner of the building, when you want to smoke. And vapes are actually banned here, but this also means that we can't regulate it. So some arguments out there say that would it be better to legalize vaping so that we can regulate it just like we do with cigarettes? Then the challenge here is understanding what's really in each vape and in each pod. So maybe we talk about regulation, because here it's banned, but we realize, for example, we've been talking a bit about how could we legalize it and regulate it? Would that be better? Then we can control the kind of vapes that come in, the kind of pods that are being used, and then we will actually know what's in these devices. Does that make sense? Would that help?
I do think it's possible, but I think there are a lot of questions that have to be answered. Firstly, it's the role that these devices actually play, right? Are they a replacement for cigarettes in only existing smokers? Or do you want them to take over cigarettes as the dominant form of nicotine consumption? Or are they to be treated purely as a medical aid to help a person quit smoking? In that case, the entire thing will be managed by healthcare professionals. It's not going to be something that you find in the provision shops. So if we look at regulation, to lift the ban totally as a knee-jerk reaction, I think that's wrong. Because once you open the floodgates, you can't really close it. I mean, you look at cigarette smoking right now. You say you want to ban cigarettes right now, try to see what the reaction is, right? It's not going to be so straightforward. And I think that helps then to fall back on certain principles when you look at regulation. For me personally, it should never be a free-for-all product that you can buy at a convenience shop. I have to be convinced, like scientifically, that it's a less harmful product. It has to be part of a certain measure or a certain protocol that helps people reduce their tobacco consumption. Measures to prevent youth from getting their hands on it have to be extremely clear. And the last thing is, of course, enforcement. The rules are only as effective as the enforcement.
So should we treat it the same way we treat cigarettes now? So now we put, really disturbing pictures on the packaging. We have health warnings. We make it really expensive.
All these kinds of things surely will have a part to play. Right now, I don't think we are ready for that, because I don't think that people understand what role they want these products to play. Whether it's recreational or whether it's a medical aid, then you'll be treated very, very differently. I don't think right now we are ready to open the gates yet.
I mean, Sarah was just telling us that she switched from cigarettes to vaping because it's more convenient and she doesn't smell, and there's less of a stigma against it. In fact, it is not regarded as bad, as you've rightly pointed out. So how are we going to deal with this? Because it's going to be a real challenge, because the whole image of vaping is really not as bad compared to traditional cigarettes.
Because it sounds more cool, it looks more cool, it's packaged in a way that's way more cool. I think it's important for the population to look at both sides of the coin. It does have its benefits, she's rightly mentioned, less smell, etc. And there's also the other side, right? For the group of people who have been helped by the product, there's also the other group whose lungs have collapsed from vaping.
Okay.
So where exactly do you stand on this? It helps both sides. But to say that it can help the whole population because a few people have experienced benefits from it, I think at this point it's not clear how.
Sarah, what do you think? Are you ever concerned that when you're buying something off some chat group in Telegram that maybe you're not even getting the real thing?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah? Doesn't that worry you?
Yeah, of course. So got to be extra careful.
But how can you tell? Have you ever smoked something or vaped something and gone like, this tastes a bit different, this smells a bit different?
Not really. It's just that sometimes the device not working, that's about it. Other than that, generally it's okay.
Right. Are you not worried that of the possible, perhaps long-term effects from using vaping, and because you don't really know what's in those pods, right?
I haven't seen a lot of articles talking about the detrimental effects of vaping.
As a pharmacist, how do you feel about the fact that Sarah also mentioned that she's not very clear what's coming in those pods that she buys on Telegram? How worried should we be about this, that these people are smoking things that, well, they don't even know what they're smoking actually?
Oh, they should be worried. They should definitely be worried. Imagine taking a drink and not knowing what's in it. That can be pretty scary. And we don't know what the long-term effects of these things actually are. It seems to have some kind of benefit, but we don't really know how it's going to pan out in the long term. So it's a very, very big risk that she's taking. And if she's comfortable with the risk, it's something she'll have to live with if there are consequences.
Would you feel safer knowing, for example, if they legalize vaping and the government says, so we make sure only certain devices, certain types of pods can come in, so therefore it's, I guess, safer because then you know what you're getting. Would that make you feel better?
Oh, it does, of course, yeah.
But what if it resulted in the vapes becoming like double the price?
Double the price. Then maybe I'll consider not vaping anymore. Then it doesn't make sense to me.
With cigarettes, it's legal but highly regulated and taxed also in Singapore. So we can't deny that it's had quite a significant impact on smokers here. In fact, compared to much of the region, we have a very low number of smokers. So I guess the question is, will this same approach work with vaping? And if not, why not?
The most important thing, in my opinion, is doing some more research on the users here in the local population. I mean, we have certain research findings from other populations, but what works here may not be exactly same as what might have worked in other countries. So that is one thing, and this research needs investment, and this research will help us personalize the efforts. So for example, we have just heard from Sarah what is important for her or what could be her motivation to get out of this. But Sarah is just one individual. So we need to survey them. We need to provide certain kind of support. We need to experiment on them, provide alternatives to them.
Right.
And then only we would know definitely what might work for this country.
Okay, one last thing with regards to this issue of vaping in Singapore, maybe Prof, what is one thing you feel we could do next to sort of help this and to help, our young people?
Yeah, I think there needs to be some research on what is the problem and what could be their motivation. Understanding that is the first thing. And then we have to build something to help them cope, right? They will have the urge to smoke or vape. So how do we provide some alternatives, right? In the past, for example, people used nicotine replacement therapy, some patch to help them quit smoking, right? So similar approaches, or if it is something that they are doing to cope with stress and anxiety, so then are there other ways to cope with stress or anxiety? You have to understand the addiction issue rather than, dealing with it in a very heavy-handed way. We have to be more compassionate.
I think there are a lot of things that they haven't worked out yet. It's moved much quicker than regulation can catch up. They have not really decided what role they want it to play and how they're going to slowly let it in, because the culture that we have here in healthcare is a lot more conservative, right? Which means that we are going to be more cautious. We are going to look at what happens everywhere else in the world before making a decision. And I think that's the right place to go. And that's the right way to tackle the problem. Because at least for us as healthcare professionals, I'm interested in anything that will help in my patient's health. But to open the floodgates and put my patients at a higher risk, nah, I'm not going to do that.
Sarah, what do you think? If you had a choice, how would you like to move forward with this?
Honestly, I think the ban should be lifted. I think people should have the choice to have a decision whether they want to vape or they want to carry on smoking cigarettes, right? Because I think vaping could be one of the ways to quit smoking entirely, at least for myself. So, like by banning it, it's not allowing us so we can, for example, if let's say I really want to smoke but I can't vape outside in public, so I have no choice but to buy a cigarette.
Okay. Well, one thing for certain in life we know is that, one person's loss could be another person's gain. So whether it's smoking old-fashioned cigarettes or vaping, it's unlikely that, a country like Singapore, we could ever fully eradicate either of these. But I guess it shouldn't stop us from trying and from helping those around us. I, for sure, I'm going to keep drumming home this message to my kids, let them know that it is one of those cases of I truly believe that prevention is better than cure. So thank you so much to my guest, Sarah. All the best. We hope that next time we talk to you, maybe you won't be doing either one of them anymore.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming and joining us. Thank you to everyone who's listening as well. The team behind this podcast are Jacqueline Chan, Joanne Chan, Tiffany Ang, Daniel Lee, and Crispina Robert. And I'm Stephen Chia. I'll see you next week.